Chapter 1. The Post That Erased Me. When your own family votes you out of existence, what do? My sister turned my name into a headline claiming I stole from my clients. My father shared it with a caption about protecting the family even if it meant destroying me. My mother stayed quiet and hit like. Overnight, I went from daughter to disgrace. They wanted to erase me, but they forgot one thing: I keep receipts. My name is Marissa Hale, and this is how I turned their lies into evidence. The cancellation email landed in my inbox on a damp December morning in Baton Rouge, and for a few seconds I thought it was a holiday schedule. Then I saw the subject line and the single sentence from Carter Mills at Bayou Analytics, saying the company was terminating our contract due to brand risk, and I felt something inside me tip like a glass set too close to the counter's edge. $10,000 was more than a number to me. It was rent and insurance and the quiet promise that my new life after the divorce could stand on its own feet. I stared at the screen until the words lost their edges. I told myself to breathe. I counted to 5. I opened my notebook and wrote down the date, the project code, the amount, the reason. I always write things down. Numbers calm me. The reason did not make sense until that evening when I sat on the edge of my bed with the lamp on low and scrolled past a flood of blinking red icons. There it was, a post climbing through my feed like ivy up a wall, a black background with white letters that asked if one person could be erased from the Hale family, who would it be? My name was already trending in the comments, tagged and spelled correctly, easy to find, easy to press. The top of the post carried the author line, and my stomach went cold. Lydia Hale, my sister, she lives in Houston now, writes a column that people read with their morning coffee. The post had been shared by my father, James Hale, retired banker and self-appointed guardian of our last name. Beside the share was a caption about protecting family reputation even from your own. I read it twice, then a third time, to make sure my mind was not distorting it. It was exactly what it looked like. I scrolled through the comments and watched relatives from church potlucks and graduations and backyard barbecues treat me like a thought experiment. A cousin wrote that every family has dead weight. An aunt clicked a laughing reaction under a stranger's line about how some women just invite trouble. My mother, Linda, left a simple heart, the kind people use when they do not want to be seen as cruel, but still want to be counted. I pressed the side of my phone to my forehead and told myself to put the device down. Instead, I opened the post details. I needed to know the shape of what I was facing. The first punch hurt. The second came with words that could not be brushed off as opinion. In the body of the post, in Lydia's own text, she claimed I had stolen client data and lied about my projects, and that our family was lucky I was not in jail. The accusation sat there stark and clean, a sentence dressed as gossip and weaponized as fact. I watched my name turn into a warning. I saw people I did not know write that they always suspected I was unstable after the divorce. I read the word unstable twice, then looked at the wall until the room steadied. I still went to my parents' house for Christmas Eve. Habit is a kind of gravity. The air smelled of cinnamon and pine cleaner. My father stood in the doorway with his arms folded and said nothing to me about the post. My mother floated between the kitchen and the living room, careful smiles pasted on setting napkins like she could arrange the night into order. Lydia arrived in a red sweater and breezed past me with the air of a woman who had already decided she was forgiven. She told the room that people should not take social media so seriously. My father added that adults do not let these things get under their skin. My mother glanced at me, then at the table, then at Lydia, as if her eyes could iron out the creases. Ethan sat in a corner nursing a soda and did not look up when I caught his eye. I understood. We were siblings, but in that room we were also witnesses. Every word said there would be used later. I ate enough to be polite and excused myself before dessert. Outside, the humidity wrapped around me like a damp shawl. I sat in my car under the eaves while rain knocked softly on the windshield. I took the laptop from the passenger seat and balanced it on my knees. The screen glow lit the interior in a cold square. If they wanted to turn me into an idea, I would turn their idea into evidence. I opened the post, copied the link, took screenshots of the headline, the body text, the caption under my father's share. I captured the comments under my mother's heart, the threads where relatives speculated about my mental health, the strangers who claimed they knew insiders at my old workplace. I saved each image file with a timestamp and labeled them in a folder I named Evidence. The name steadied my breathing. I moved from Facebook to my email and pulled the cancellation notice from Bayou Analytics into the same folder. I forwarded it to myself so it would exist in two places. I drafted a short summary of my work scope and the deliverables already completed so the record would not be buried under later noise. I listed my hours by date. I noted that the project code appeared in my bank reconciliation for November. I wrote in my notebook that words travel faster than work does. I made myself write the next sentence too. Words can take work away. I should have called Lydia. I should have told her to take it down and to stop pretending a poll about erasing me was a harmless joke. I even typed her name into my phone. Then another notification flashed across the top of the laptop screen and tugged my eyes back. The post had just passed 3,000 shares. A list of corporate pages appeared among the icons of friends and neighbors. Two of them were companies I had contracted with in the past year. One belonged to a recruiter in Dallas who had emailed me the week before about a new analytics role. I clicked through and saw my name sitting there in a comment thread under a stranger's claim that I could not be trusted with client data. The recruiter had liked the comment. I sat very still while the air clicked in my ears. I closed my eyes and pictured a file cabinet. Some part of me stood and opened a drawer and placed the image inside the way you file a bad result so you do not forget its existence. I thought about the summer I was 8 and Lydia dared me to jump from the dock into the deep section of the lake. I had gone under and heard nothing but water, a blank quiet that felt like being erased. The sound in my ears now felt like that same quiet. When I opened my eyes, the laptop screen was a grid of tabs. Post, share, comment, message, email, contract. Each one needed to be captured, labeled, stored. I walked myself through it step by step like a procedure in a lab. Copy the link, save the image, record the time, note the connection. Do not argue online. Do not explain yourself to a crowd that has already voted. Turn this into a record that makes sense to people who read records for a living. I thought about my father's caption. He had written about protecting the family reputation even from your own. I replayed the sentence until I knew how it fit into the story he tells himself about leadership and sacrifice. Then I wrote one of my own in the notebook. Protecting a name by throwing a person away is not protection, it is disposal. The phone buzzed with a text from a former coworker asking if I was all right. I typed that I was fine, then erased it. I tried again and wrote that I was documenting. That word felt truer than fine. Another notification pinged and reported a spike in engagement on the post. I clicked over and saw a new batch of comments questioning my professionalism. I took another set of screenshots, then another angling the cursor to capture the tiny icons that showed where the shares originated. I enlarged the view on one that appeared to come from a corporate page in Texas. I printed it to PDF and saved it. In the quiet between pings, I heard my father in my head telling me to let things go. I heard Lydia explaining that she had only started a conversation. I heard my mother saying we should be a united front. I wrote those lines down too, not as evidence but as reminder. This was how people shrink harm into softness. This was how pain is dismissed as sensitivity. I let the sentences sit there on the page until they lost their power. The rain eased into a steady hiss. The neighborhood was dark except for a few blue televisions blinking through curtains. I could have driven home and crawled under a blanket and told myself that none of this mattered beyond a week of embarrassment. Instead, I stayed where I was and kept working. If they had chosen to make me a spectacle, then I would choose to make what they did measurable. I copied the profile image beside my father's caption and saved it under his name. I captured the line from Lydia that accused me of theft and deceit and jail. I placed it beside the contract cancellation. I moved the files into subfolders by source and date. I renamed the larger folder with today's date and a number 1 at the end because I knew I would need it too. Another notification arrived. The post had been reshared by a community forum that liked to collect family drama. The comment at the top suggested that I was the kind of woman who brought chaos wherever she went. I sat back and pressed my thumb into the hinge of my jaw until the muscle released. I put my hands on the steering wheel and kept them there until I could feel the texture of the leather and hear the slow sound of my own breath. Then I reached over and closed the laptop. I did not dial Lydia. I did not ask for mercy from the person who had just written a lie that cut directly into my work. I did not ask my father to sentences twice, then filed them into the folder I had created, naming each PDF with the date and the sender. I opened a spreadsheet and began a damage tab, listing Bayou Analytics at 10,000 Lafayette, at an expected 8,000 across Q1 Shreveport, at 5,000 with a likely renewal, then a column for the people posting were my family. Holly said the labels we put on people do not change what their words do in the world. She offered a name, Michael Carter, privacy and defamation good, in a room no patience for theatrics. New Orleans. She could text an introduction. I showered, dressed, and drove east on I-10 with a folder box belted into the passenger seat like a child. The city sat gray and gold under winter light when I crossed the high-rise. Michael's office smelled faintly of paper and lemon cleaner, and the lobby had a bowl of mints that looked like snow. He met me in a conference room and shook my hand once firm as if we were about to lift something heavy together. He asked for a clean narrative first. No feelings, just sequence. I told him about the contract, the post, the caption, the accusation written as fact, the shares climbing, the relatives, the cancellation, the 2 follow-on emails that morning. He asked for timelines, names, locations, screenshots, links, logs, and I slid the first stack across the table and kept sliding until the surface between us looked like a topographic map of a bad week. He paged through without hurry, made notes in a square hand, and asked precise questions that told me he had heard everything. Michael said this looked like public defamation with measurable harm. He said interstate details mattered. The principal author lives and works in Texas, and I live and work in Louisiana. He said diversity jurisdiction could bring us into federal court if the amount in controversy exceeded $75,000 for the named defendant, and that the record of cancellations and the projected loss in pipeline could plausibly meet that threshold. He said the accusation about theft and deceit was a factual claim, not an opinion, and that the share by my father with a caption about protecting the family name created Republication exposure. He said, do not respond online. He said, let them talk into a microphone that records. I asked what happens to families who decide to act like a mob in public. He said families are not special classes of speakers, and that the law cares more about acts than labels. I said I did not want to blow up what was left of us. He said I was not exploding anything, I was building a boundary. He said names might belong to everyone, but reputations live on one body at a time. He assigned homework. Collect signed copies of all active contracts. Save confirmations of cancellation and any threads that mention the post. Get vendor invoices for crisis management because cleaning a mess is a cost of harm. Pull bank statements showing ordinary course revenue to substantiate projections. Take screenshots of any employer or corporate accounts that shared or engaged with the post because corporate eyes tend to harden into corporate decisions. Back everything up in 2 places. Keep a log of time spent, and emotional distress is not a legal line item, but it does explain choices, so write it gently in the margins for me. On the drive back, the sky cracked open to a thin blue, and I felt a kind of focus I had not felt in days. I made lists. I called the recruiter in Dallas and asked if they had any notes related to their social media browse. She said that legal could not share specifics, but that a public post alleging misconduct makes a risk committee nervous. I asked her to email the official withdrawal. She did within the hour, and I filed it. By late afternoon, my damage tab crossed 100,000 when I added the public relations firm's estimate for a 6-week stabilization plan and the revenue I could reasonably expect to lose from the pipeline that had gone quiet. I wrote the number in my notebook and circled it once. I sent Michael a scan of the tab with documentation attached. He replied in 8 minutes with a thank you and a short line that said keep going, and a second line that said no public statements. My phone lit with the family group chat while I was saving files. The tone moved from exasperated to scolding in 3 screens. My father wrote that I was humiliating us by entertaining outsiders. Lydia wrote that only people who cannot handle the truth go running to lawyers. My mother wrote that I should stop making a small thing large because the neighborhood is watching. Ethan's name blinked at the bottom. He wrote that he was sorry that he had not known the post would travel this way. I put the phone face down, opened my log, and transcribed the relevant parts as a summary line, keeping emotions out of the record so I could feel them somewhere else. I walked to the kitchen and made coffee I did not want, just to hold something warm. I tried to imagine a conversation where my father admitted he had been reckless. I tried to write a script where Lydia withdrew the line that accused me of crimes. I tried to set my mother in a scene where she chose me, not the optics of a spotless table. The scripts crumbled at the first spoken sentence. I rinsed the cup and set it on the rack and went back to my desk. Work remained. The date ticked forward one day at a time, and each day I collected another small piece of weight. A neighbor texted that the post had been screenshot into a neighborhood forum. I captured the thread and filed it. A former client in Lake Charles replied to my check-in with a careful note that they needed to pause discussions due to new information. I thanked them for their transparency and filed the pause. The folder grew like a living thing. A week stretched long and thin, and then folded back on itself. When I felt myself sinking into the soft dark of hurt, I pulled up the intake form Michael had asked me to complete and filled in 3 more lines because lines turn feelings into facts. On New Year's Eve, I laid everything out on my dining table. Contracts, cancellations, screenshots, analytics. The spreadsheet with the numbers printed cleanly so a stranger could follow the math. The proposed complaint lay on top a stack of pages that, if filed, would carry my name against my sister's and my father's, with the words et al. Trailing like a quiet inventory of everyone who had chosen to participate. I ran my hand over the paper as if smoothing a sheet before sleep. Outside, neighbors practiced fireworks early. Red and gold splashed on the ceiling and faded. I thought of the little girl on the dock again, the one who jumped because her sister told her she would be fine. I thought of the way silence felt underwater, how complete it was, how it erased the shore. I stood at the window and watched the sky stutter with light and heard people whoop down the block and felt a simple truth settle. Silence had not protected me. It had only made their story louder. I sat down at the table and picked up the pen. My name looked steadier than my hand felt. I signed the engagement letter with Michael first, then the verification for the complaint, then the draft demand for retraction his office had prepared to send with it. I checked the dates again, then the case caption, Hale v. Hale et al., and the venue, and the amount in controversy noted with a number that was not round. It is important, he had said, that numbers feel real. Midnight rode in on a wave of sound. I heard children shriek and someone shout the count, then the pause right after 12 when the city holds its breath before the new year actually starts. I stacked the papers, squared the edges, and placed them back in the folder. I switched off the dining room light, and the room fell into the soft dark I had learned to sit inside without drowning. I walked to the window one last time. Fireworks traced quick flowers in the sky, then vanished into smoke. I rested my forehead against the glass and let the cool steady me. I did not text the group. I did not open the post to see how many more shares it had collected while I worked. I would send Michael the signed pages in the morning, and he would file them, and a new kind of time would begin. I pressed my fingers to the spine of the folder and felt the weight of what it contained. The last second of the year slid away. I said a small prayer without words and turned off the lamp. Chapter 3. Family on Trial. The courthouse smelled like dust and coffee when I walked in that March morning. Baton Rouge was warming early that year, the air thick enough to cling to skin even before noon. Reporters stood in small knots near the entrance, murmuring names, holding cameras low like weapons on standby. One of them, a woman with dark hair and a canvas notebook, caught my eye and gave a nod that was almost kind. Later, I would learn her name was Erin Delgado. Inside the hall buzzed with that peculiar mixture of gossip and tension that only family cases attract. Lydia was already there, seated at the front with a man in a gray suit who looked like he had never laughed in public. I recognized the logo on his folder, a Texas firm that handled the Houston Chronicle's litigation. My parents sat a few rows behind her. My mother clutched her purse in both hands. My father leaned forward, elbows on knees, expression arranged into disappointment. Michael met me at the aisle, calm as ever. His tie was the color of steel. "Remember," he said quietly, "facts first, feelings later." I nodded and sat beside him. The clerk called the case, and the shuffle of papers sounded like 100 small sighs. When Michael rose, his voice carried cleanly across the room. "This case concerns a false public statement made by Ms. Lydia Hale of Houston, Texas, and republished by her father, Mr. James Hale of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The post contained an explicit claim that the plaintiff, Ms. Marissa Hale, stole client data and lied about her projects, a statement that is demonstrably false. That post has been shared over 3,000 times, and we can show financial damages exceeding $100,000 directly tied to its spread. The judge, a woman in her early 50s with clear, sharp eyes, nodded for him to continue. Michael laid out the timeline and projected evidence. The room watched the slide on the screen, a screenshot of the post with my name burned into the center of it. I focused on the line that called me a thief, forcing my breath to stay slow. When he finished, Lydia's lawyer stood. His voice was smooth, meant for microphones. He called what she wrote a casual remark on a family dispute. He said her statement was an opinion reflecting concern about her sister's stability after a difficult divorce. The judge turned to Lydia. "Is that accurate, Ms. Hale?" "Was it opinion?" Lydia smiled like she was posing for a photo. "I was just being honest. Everyone in our family knows Marissa hasn't been herself since her marriage ended." "I didn't mean it as an attack." Michael's pen scratched across his pad. The judge leaned forward slightly. "Honesty and truth are not synonyms, Ms. Hale." My father shifted suddenly, clearing his throat. "She embarrassed us. My wife and I had to answer questions at church. We had to protect our name. Sometimes a family has to set the record straight." Michael raised an eyebrow. "By calling your daughter a criminal, Mr. Hale?" "She made choices," my father said flatly. We responded. I kept my voice level when the judge asked if I wanted to respond. "I work hard, Your Honor. I never stole anything. The only thing I did was stay quiet when my family turned me into their cautionary tale. My father says he protected our name, but I am the one who built mine from scratch." The silence afterward was brittle. The judge looked from one table to the other, then said the case would be continued for additional evidence. She wanted technical verification of where the post originated and IP trace metadata. Without it, the jurisdiction question was unresolved. She gave us 3 weeks. The gavel sounded like a door closing. Outside, the reporters were waiting. Aaron approached, first recorder in hand. "Ms. Hale, would you like to comment on today's hearing?" "No," I said. "Not yet." She nodded, not pushing, and I walked to my car, feeling as if gravity had doubled. That night, the house felt too quiet. I reheated soup I couldn't taste and stared at the folder on the table. Every click of the clock made the room smaller. I had wanted the law to bring clarity, but it had only brought delay. I called Michael and he said it was normal. We would subpoena server records if we had to. He told me to rest. I said I would try. I didn't. Around 10, headlights swept across the front windows. A knock followed, soft but urgent. I opened the door and found Ethan standing there, shoulders hunched, hoodie half zipped. He held a flash drive between 2 fingers, like it might burn him. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. He didn't sit. His voice shook slightly. "I saved something before they deleted it." Lydia posted from her work laptop. The company's server logs everything. I copied the log. I stared at him, not understanding at first. "You have the server log from Houston." He nodded. "She told Dad the company would cover it up, but I work in IT. I checked the file path. It's all there." The post went out through her office account at the Chronicle. Dad found out and told her to wipe it. I saw his email. My throat felt dry. "You're sure?" He swallowed. "I shouldn't even have this. But I couldn't watch you get buried for something you didn't do." I took the flash drive from his hand. He exhaled like someone releasing a secret that had been bruising his ribs. "Ethan, they'll know you pulled this. I used a backup snapshot from the night before she deleted it. They can't trace it to me directly." He hesitated. "You deserve to be cleared." I thanked him, but the words felt thin. He left soon after, slipping out into the wet dark. I locked the door, then walked to my desk. The drive was warm in my palm. I slid it into the port, waited for the folder to open. A directory appeared full of text files and timestamps. My hands trembled as I clicked one. The metadata was clear, originating IP Houston, Texas timestamp, matching the first appearance of the post. Another file opened with an email thread between Lydia and my father. His words blurred until I forced myself to focus. The line read, "Delete that post fast. I'll say I shared it first." I sat back, staring at the glow of the screen. It was proof of everything I had suspected but hoped wasn't true. My father hadn't stumbled into the fire. He had struck the match and then tried to hide the soot. The clock on the wall clicked past midnight. The only sound was the hum of the computer. Outside, rain began to fall, slow and deliberate. I copied the folder to 2 drives, labeled them Evidence 2 and Evidence 3, and placed one in the safe, one in my purse. Then I closed the laptop and leaned back in the chair, watching the faint reflection of my face in the dark window. The case was no longer about damage control. It was about truth under oath. I pressed my palms together until the tremor left them and whispered to the quiet room that this would be enough. The rain tapped harder as if agreeing, and I let it. Chapter 4: The Federal Case. By June, the air in New Orleans felt like a curtain of steam thick enough to taste. The courthouse on Poydras Street rose pale against the sky, the flag outside unmoving in the heat. When Michael and I walked through the front doors, the echo of our steps sounded louder than I expected. Inside, the federal courtroom gleamed with wood and brass cold air humming from vents hidden in the ceiling. Reporters waited along the back wall, notebooks open, eyes bright with curiosity. Aaron Delgado sat among them, pen poised. Michael leaned toward me as we took our seats. "Stay steady," he murmured. "They'll push you. Don't give them tone, just truth." Across the aisle, Lydia avoided my eyes, flipping through a stack of papers she didn't need to read. Her lawyer whispered to her, calm and confident. My father sat beside her, one hand on his knee, one gripping the chair arm like he could hold the whole family together by sheer will. My mother wasn't there. Her absence sat like a shadow behind him. The clerk announced the case. The judge, Danielle Brooks, entered with a quiet authority that silenced the room. She was in her mid-50s, hair pulled back, expression sharp but not unkind. "Proceed, counsel," she said. Michael stood. "Your Honor, when these defendants laughed and shared a lie, they didn't just embarrass my client, they destroyed the professional reputation she built on her own. The Post wasn't opinion, it was accusation. It said she stole, that she lied, and that she was lucky not to be in jail. These words reached thousands. They cost her over $100,000 in work measurable and documented. Today we ask the court to see the difference between free speech and public harm." He gestured to the projection screen. The lights dimmed slightly as images appeared, the post, the caption, "The shares, my father's comment." The next slide showed the email from Carter Mills canceling the Bayou Analytics contract, followed by an analyst's report connecting the Post's timeline to my lost revenue. Each click felt like a heartbeat. The room was still except for the quiet buzz of the projector. When he finished, Lydia's attorney rose smoothly. "This case, Your Honor, is about family discord, not defamation." The statement in question was opinion, not fact. Ms. Hale expressed concern over her sister's behavior, as any relative might. "We are here because the plaintiff cannot accept criticism." Michael's reply was immediate. "Opinions do not trigger contract cancellations, counsel. Lies do." The judge's eyes flicked toward Lydia. "Ms. Hale, you may speak for yourself." Lydia stood. Her voice was soft but practiced. "I was worried about my sister. She was fragile after her divorce. I wrote something careless maybe, but I didn't mean harm, and I certainly didn't tell anyone to fire her." Michael stepped closer to the lectern. "You also posted from your employer's server in Texas, did you not?" Lydia blinked. "I don't know about that." He clicked another slide. The screen filled with the metadata from Ethan's file, complete with timestamp and IP address. The words Houston Chronicle Network appeared clearly at the top. Her attorney objected. The judge overruled him. Michael turned back to Lydia. "This is your account, correct?" "Yes. And this is your father's email telling you to delete the post." He clicked again. The words glowed white against black. "Delete that post fast. I'll say I shared it first." My father's face lost color. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Hale, did you instruct your daughter to remove evidence?" He cleared his throat. "I was just trying to stop the spread. I didn't want my family dragged into this," Michael said quietly. "It was already there because you put it there." The judge raised a hand for silence. "Continue." Michael looked at me. "Ms. Hale, would you take the stand?" I walked to the witness box, right palm raised, voice steady as I swore the oath. When I sat down, the wood beneath me felt cool grounding. "Ms. Hale, the judge said you may tell the court what this has cost you." I looked at the exhibits glowing on the screen, at the lines of text that had once been casual cruelty. "My father says he wanted to protect the family name," I said, "but he did that by erasing mine. My sister called me a thief, and strangers believed her. Clients believed her. It wasn't a family argument anymore. It was my reputation being torn apart in public. I didn't come here for revenge. I came here because the truth matters more than their comfort. The courtroom stayed silent for a long moment. Then the judge nodded. Thank you, Ms. Hale. When Michael returned to our table, he said softly, That's enough. Let the evidence speak now. After a brief recess, the defense offered closing remarks about forgiveness and misunderstanding. The judge listened without visible reaction. Michael closed for us with a simple sentence. Reputation is not a toy, Your Honor. It's a livelihood, and my client's was broken for sport. The judge left to deliberate. The reporters rustled their notes. My father stared at the floor. Lydia twisted a pen between her fingers, the cap squeaking faintly each time it turned. Time stretched until the door opened again. Judge Brooks returned verdict in hand. Her voice was even as she read. The court finds that the statement in question contained false factual claims made with negligence, published across state lines, and resulted in verifiable economic harm. The plaintiff is entitled to relief. I watched my father exhale sharply. Defendant Lydia Hale is ordered to issue a public written apology within 7 days on all platforms where the post appeared. Defendant James Hale is ordered to compensate the plaintiff in the amount of $95,000. The matter of potential obstruction and data tampering will be referred to the United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Texas for further review. The gavel struck once. The sound was final. Lydia slumped in her chair. My father stood slow and stiff. He turned toward me as the room emptied. I didn't think it would go this far, he said quietly. I held his gaze. You were the one who hit share, Dad. I only hit save. He looked away, then walked out with his lawyer trailing behind. Michael packed the files into his briefcase. Well done, he said. You didn't flinch. I almost did, I answered. That's why we build records, he said, smiling faintly. Paper doesn't flinch. Outside, the afternoon sun cut sharp lines across the courthouse steps. Reporters shouted questions, but I kept walking. Erin Delgado lifted her camera at the curb, snapping as I stepped into the light. The file folder in my hand caught the sun, and for a second the gold reflection flared like fire. I heard the shutter click again. Later, that photo would run with her story in the Baton Rouge Tribune, under the headline about a daughter who took her family to court for the truth. Someone online would caption it. Sometimes the truth needs a courtroom. I didn't know any of that yet. I only knew the light was bright, the air smelled faintly of salt from the river, and for the first time in months I walked without counting the cost of each step. Chapter 5. The Price of Dignity. December settled over Baton Rouge with a thin blue light and the kind of cold that makes sidewalks sound sharper underfoot. By then the apology had come and gone. Lydia posted on every platform where the lie had lived. She wrote that her statement was false and that she regretted the harm it caused. The words were plain and unadorned, probably crafted by counsel, but the plainness felt right. My father wired the money without a note. The bank app logged the deposit and closed that part of the story with a neat green checkmark. The Department of Justice in Houston opened a quiet inquiry that did not involve me beyond a single phone call to confirm a date and a time. I answered what I was asked and went back to work. Work looked different that winter. I signed a lease on a small suite off Jefferson Highway and painted the walls a mild gray that made sunlight feel organized. The door carried a new decal in white letters. Hale Digital Recovery. I bought 2 desks at a thrift store and sanded the scars out of their tops on a Saturday while a space heater hummed. A printer arrived on Monday, large and sensible, with trays that clicked into place like decisions. I made a notebook for intake and created a stack of forms that asked careful questions. I learned how to listen while people described the bruise of public humiliation. I learned how long to let silence sit before moving it into action. At noon, I would stand by the window and watch cars thread through the parking lot, then return to the folder on my screen labeled Client 1, then Client 2, then Client 3. I never saved anything to a single location. I backed up twice without fail. Some clients were nurses whose supervisors had shared rumors in neighborhood groups. Some were teachers misnamed in viral posts and made to wear the name like a coat in July. One was a pharmacy tech whose ex wrote that she falsified prescriptions, a lie that bent her life until we showed it for what it was. People cried when I told them that documentation is a form of hope. I kept tissues in a square wooden box that matched the desks. Holly stopped by once a week with coffee and the kind of questions friends ask when they believe you can do hard things but also know you are human. She asked if I had slept. Sometimes I had, sometimes not. She asked about the office plants, and I admitted I was trying not to kill them. She brought a spider plant in a pot that looked like a little stone and said it was hardy. It survived. Ethan came by on Thursdays after work. He helped set up a small server in the back room and wrote a script that checked folder integrity 3 times a day. We did not talk about the night he handed me the flash drive, not at first. Then one evening, as we coiled a cable, he said that he had expected me to hate him for being slow to act. I told him I had been slow too. We stood in the doorway for a moment, 2 people learning that loyalty can arrive late and still count. My mother kept her distance through spring and summer. In October, she called to say the church wanted me to speak at a women's breakfast about resilience. I said I was not ready. She said she understood and then told me the pumpkin sale had gone well, and the choir had a new director from Mobile who favored hymns that moved. I pictured her in the kitchen with the phone tucked under her chin and the afternoon light skipping off the sink. After we hung up, she texted a photo of an old Christmas ornament I had made in 2nd grade, a paper angel with yarn hair. I kept the photo and did not reply. Love sometimes needs room to relearn itself. In late November, an organizer from TEDx Baton Rouge invited me to share a talk about digital harm and accountability. The email said a former client had recommended me. I thought of her as a social worker who had sat with a straight spine in my office while we wrote a chronology that became her shield. I wrote back yes, and then stood at the window and watched a bird land on the power line and swing there light and certain. The week of the talk, the city smelled like wood smoke and oranges. I practiced in the evenings with a glass of water and a stack of note cards that I never used on stage. The auditorium was smaller than I imagined and warmer. The red letters stood at the back of the stage like a patient chorus. When my turn came, the mic felt solid against my skin and my hands knew where to rest. I told the room I had learned that people confuse forgiveness with silence. I said the sentence that had followed me for months. People call forgiveness noble, but no one tells you that before you forgive, you have to be respected. I spoke slowly, letting the words make space around themselves. I saw faces tip forward in the half-light. I described receipts as a kind of dignity. I explained how to capture context and why timestamps are a friend. I said that you can love your family and still refuse to carry their lies. When I finished, the room stayed quiet in the soft way that means the air is considering what it heard. Then the applause rose, not loud, but honest. Afterward, I stood in the lobby with a small line of people. A teacher pressed my hands and thanked me. A man in a suit asked for a card for his sister. A woman with a blue scarf said she had not realized she was allowed to say that harm happened. At the end of the line, Ethan waited. He held a folded piece of paper and did not speak until people drifted by to the coat rack and the doors. He placed the note in my palm. You did what none of us dared to do. You told the truth. I closed my hand over the paper and nodded. We walked outside together into the thin winter evening. The air smelled faintly of frying oil from a food truck, and someone laughed near the corner. A crescent moon sat low above the roofline. Ethan said he was proud of me. I said I was proud of him too. At home later, I checked the newsroom site out of habit and saw that the old post no longer appeared in any cached view. The search returned a blank gray rectangle that read, "Content unavailable." On my father's profile, a new line sat at the top with a photo of a quiet lake at dusk. Silence can wound deeper than words. I learned it the hard way. I read it once, then again. The sentence felt like a door clicking shut. Not locked, but closed. The next morning, I unlocked the office and set the lights to low. The logo on the glass door reflected against the window, Hale Digital Recovery, as if the letters were standing in the parking lot reading themselves. I made coffee and opened the blinds and checked the server logs. Everything was green. I walked the length of the room and straightened a stack of folders just because order is a kindness to the future. Then I stood at the window and watched a woman step out of a sedan and search for our suite number with a paper in her hand. I recognized the look, the ground shifting back toward you for the first time. When she sat across from me 20 minutes later, she said an old friend had made a wild claim on a public page and that she was tired of feeling like the ground was mud. I told her we would start with a timeline and that we would gather facts the way a beach gathers shells one at a time, not rushed. She breathed out and her shoulders dropped a half inch. I handed her a pen and the intake sheet. She wrote her name carefully. The heater hummed. Outside, a truck backed into a space with a beep that sounded almost like a metronome. In the quiet that followed our first questions, I thought of the day this all began and the night I sat in a car saving images while rain whispered on the roof. I thought of the courtroom light and the photo Aaron took and the way people online said that sometimes the truth needs a courtroom. Maybe it does. Sometimes it only needs a folder and a spine. I walked her through the next steps and promised to call by Friday. When she left, she thanked me like you thank someone for carrying one end of a heavy dresser. I cleaned the conference table and rinsed 2 coffee mugs and returned to my desk. Sunlight pooled on the gray paint and made a soft rectangle on the floor. I touched the decal on the glass as if to check that the letters still adhered. I do not think about winning now. Winning feels like a bell that fades. I think about keeping what is mine and giving what I can. My father erased a post. I rebuilt a life. Both are true at once, and that is enough. If this story sounds like something you have lived through, keep your records reach for help and speak when you are ready. Share what parts of this hit home for you, tell me where you are in your own timeline, and stay with me for the next stories we will tell together, because sometimes the quietest justice is the kind that lets you live more clearly than they ever imagined.